Welcome to the Inflection Podcast, where we explore the pivotal moments that have shaped us into who we are today. I am your host, Anabi, and I can't wait to dive into these moments with you. Let's get it. Welcome to another episode of the Inflection Podcast. It is a pleasure to have Weh'yee here today with me, who's traveling the world as we speak, currently somewhere in Africa. And we'd like to just chat through some inflection points and get into it. Thanks so much for joining, Weh'yee.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, totally. Ever since I came across your journey, right, on LinkedIn, it's been very fascinating for me just to learn more about the process it's taken to get to where you're at right now. And I figured it'd be amazing to dive into that a little bit. Just if you could dive into that, what was the precipitating factor, right, for you packing up, going to Africa, making investments, building businesses?
Yeah, it's kind of a story, so I'll give you the abbreviated version. Basically, I was working and living in New York City. My background is in startups. So I've always worked in early stage organizations, very early company building. We're talking about the founding team or working directly with co-founders. And so I was connected with this Brooklyn-based electronic recycler. I got connected with them, but they were like a cool recycler. So they used to connect with some of their clients on Facebook, Airbnb, Twitter. And yeah, so it was a great opportunity. And they were also building technology around the service. So I was working with them. I moved up fairly quickly in New York, and they ended up moving me out to California. So I was living and working in San Francisco, and I was managing and operating the West Coast side of their business. And I think this isn't an abnormal story. A lot of people climbing the corporate ladder, in my case, the startup ladder, and advancing in career, getting increases in compensation. But then what comes with that is the more money you're making, there's the more responsibility and the more work. So
Yeah.
that was also increasing like right at the same pace. It was fun at first. I was traveling. They were flying me around the country. I had the American Express business card and everything like that. But towards the end, right before I ended up making that decision to leave, like I was completely burnt out. So my health was deteriorating. I wasn't eating right, not exercising, the stress from work. I was growing, but there was a lot of challenges that also came along with that. And so it was really at a couple things happened. I actually had a crazy dream that it was like this toy train, the ones you have at Christmas that kind of go around the room. And all of a sudden it just crashed. But I remember when it crashed in the dream, I woke up and I had this overwhelming feeling of joy, like happiness. And it was very strange. Like normally if something crashes that you have been working on and spending time, you wouldn't feel happy. But what I took away was that something I've been working on for a long time, which was this job, was going to come to a sudden end. But it's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. And
Yeah.
so I took that and a couple other things happened. I ended up getting a one-way ticket from California to Casablanca, Morocco. And that's what started me traveling.
Oh my gosh, that's such a story, man.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And right now you're somewhere in Dakar, and I know you've made significant investments out in Africa. So how did that start? In Morocco, Casablanca, what made you go, you know what, I could build businesses out here?
Yeah, it definitely didn't start like that. I think some people have that kind of come to Jesus moment, but it wasn't like that for me. It was very gradual. So part of it was coming to explore where I'm from.
Yeah.
My parents are both from Liberia. And my plan was to backpack from Casablanca overland to Lagos, Nigeria. I was going to do like that whole route. And as I was doing this trip, I ended up landing in Senegal in the north in a place called Saint Louis. So a small like fishing city. Used to be a fishing village, but it's bigger now. And I was volunteering at this nonprofit that was helping women who were in vulnerable situations and children. The long story short is that there was a family from the Central African Republic who was there, and they ended up getting kicked out of the center for violating the rules. One of the sisters got pregnant, and this is a very strict Muslim society and culture. And although the organization was built to help people that are in that situation, because of the culture and the rules that they had, they ended up tossing them out, and they were in a situation where they had no help. So through that, it was crazy, man. Like I remember I felt really bad for them, and I didn't understand like how the organization could do that. But what I didn't want to do is say, I'm going to just start giving you money, because It's not sustainable for me. It's not sustainable for you. That's not
Exactly.
helping anybody. So what I decided, and this kind of turned my attention to things, was like, how can you make money yourself? And they were already selling charcoal on a very micro level. They would literally buy and try to resell for a very small amount. And the first question I asked was like, how much do you pay for the charcoal? And how much could you pay if you buy like the actual big bag yourself? And
Yeah.
that opened the door to say, oh, the margins are actually pretty good. And being the entrepreneurial spirit, that took me down the rabbit hole where I started doing very micro investments here in Senegal.
Oh my gosh, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and you've expanded a little bit to one of the entities you own, right? You create opportunities for folks in Africa to get jobs with companies in Africa and beyond. So what was that pivoting into that or adding that to your portfolio?
Started from charcoal to now, yeah, we have a company called Internally that's helping to connect people here on the continent to remote and in-person jobs in Africa, but then also around the world. So a lot of stuff happened in between that.
Yeah.
I didn't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to launch a technology-based company that's focused on facilitating startup work and recruiting. But it was just step by step. Like I think sometimes in life, there are big moments that happen. And
Yeah.
that's definitely, I think, quitting my job and buying a plane ticket was a pivotal moment that like everything that happened during that year of travel was in itself a singular moment that really changed my life. Those are sustainable. If I think if you're
Yeah.
chasing or continuously looking for every week a new pivotal moment, it's not a pivotal moment. And
Yeah.
so there's seasons also where it's step by step and you really brick by brick building. And so started with charcoal, expanded to things like chickens and agriculture and transportation and even fish to the point where I've always still was working in tech at the same time to try to fund these ventures. And so working remotely, working with startups in London and in the UK, and then realizing that I wanted to build something on that end for myself. And that's how naturally I migrated away from doing consulting and working with other businesses, trying to help other entrepreneurs build their business to say, I want to build something online too, because I think that there's a real argument to be made that we can have a huge impact in helping to bring Africa online through remote work and facilitating work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. That's amazing. And that's something I have a heart for as well, because the continent of Africa, right, has a lot of human capital and other resources, under tapped or underutilized human capital, where folks are smart, educated, but not as many opportunities to be connected to companies. So companies like Internally, I think it's making a huge difference on the continent.
Exactly. Yeah. That's our goal. We're trying.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And all a lot of these resources I will put in the show notes for those who are curious to follow up. What is something you know now that you wish you knew when you started your journey?
That's a good one. What journey exactly though? You're talking about like when I
Yeah.
first started traveling or like business? Like which journey are we talking about?
Let's start off with when you started traveling, and then we can also talk
Okay.
about business, your ventures you're working on right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one thing I wish I would have known when I first started traveling was that it's really this idea of you can create anything. Like life can be whatever you want it to be. I learned that through traveling, but if I would have known that from the very beginning, I think that the experience itself would have been different. I think I would have looked at entrepreneurship even sooner than I did in that
Yeah,
journey. And I also think like the experiences and the way that I approached things, I would have had more fun. That was a really fun year for me. And I think I
yeah,
would have approached it with a much more open mind than I did. Even though I did have an open mind, done more things.
yeah, absolutely. And when you
Mhm.
say you can create anything, are you talking mostly from the perspective of staying loose and being open to making pivots and adjustments along your journey versus having a clear path for this is exactly what I'm going to do?
I think it's that. It's definitely being like water, being
Yeah,
fluid, being flexible and wanting to adapt, but then also like having a plan too, because I think that season was very open and I was loose and I was fluid, but also in retrospect, there is a part of me that would have wished I had more purpose on the journey versus being so open. If I would have came out and said, I really want to have these key experiences, then I could have created that. That's something that could have happened versus there were
100.
times where I was just wandering, and that's a lesson in itself. But there were points where the wandering was less interesting. At the end,
Yeah,
I really was searching for some sort of purpose, that I could have been building all along.
100%. That's something I have been learning myself. It's the value of having an overarching purpose, right? Because I think one of the challenges we humans sometimes face is we're on either end of the spectrum. You meet those people who are super strict regimen, plan to the max, where it feels like materialistic and it's annoying, right?
Yeah.
No room for pivots or making adjustments. And then we have the loose, oh yeah, it will all work out. I'm not gonna plan. It doesn't all good. But I think a good middle ground, right, is having that overarching purpose, a goal, a vector, a direction, and then being willing along that path to make adjustments. Because life, you're gonna go to business school or whatever, and then you go to the real world and you get kicked in the teeth a couple of times. It doesn't go like this.
Many times, not a couple times. Yeah.
Many times.
Yeah.
Oh, you lose all your teeth.
Exactly. No, but that's very good the way you explain that though, like the overarching goal. And I think sometimes like the pendulum swings. Like for
Yeah.
me, when I was traveling, I was very much like hippie, just take it easy. Life is good. We'll wander in the wind. And that was fun for a while, but then yeah, it got to be too
Yeah.
loose. And then before that, even right now, I'm a little bit more like I have meetings, I have deadlines, I have
Yeah.
it's strict. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think trying to find that balance is the magic of life.
Absolutely. And there are seasons, right? Exactly like you said, there are seasons you got to swing either direction more. So that's cool. What resources, as you look back, or maybe even now, have been helpful to you as a founder? You navigating this new, for lack of a better term, cultural, socioeconomic landscape in Africa, coming from New York and San Francisco. I would imagine it's in stark contrast, maybe some
Mhm.
similarities. But so, what resources have been helpful to you as you make this transition and as you're on this journey?
Yeah, I think for me personally, to open up like the foundational resources is Jesus Christ. As a Christian, that is my anchor and the thing that keeps me level headed and sane in everything that's happening. But then
Yeah.
beyond that, I think it's really just my background, startups and building companies, because that environment is so unpredictable and changing and dynamic that you really do have to be on your feet and at any moment be willing to change and to shift and adapt. So that got me used to being in these types of being comfortable with the unknown and the unpredictable, which
Yeah.
being here on the continent very much a lot of times is unknown and unpredictable. And it's just different. There are some similarities, but it's very different than living in New York City, or San Francisco is even different from New York. So there's levels and different extremes to it. I will say, if we're on this concept of like pivotal moments, as I look back in my life, I think there's been specific experiences that also prepared me to be more open to a spectrum of different cultures and ways of doing things. Like when I was very early, I remember I think it had to be seventh grade or eighth grade. I
Wow.
was in, yeah, I was like seventh grade. Somehow I got picked for this program. I don't know how I got picked up. I got picked for this program that would expose you to. Used to go visit different religious sites and have like cultural experiences. So we would go to a mosque 1 month, and the next month we would go to a synagogue, and then we would go to a Native American kind of reservation. And so we were doing these essentially what were field trips, but we were learning, and there was like a curriculum that went along with it. And I think if I think back, that was the first time in my brain I really realized like, oh, like there's a lot more than what I have been seeing. And that started to unravel my brain in the sense to be more receptive to different things and different food and different ways of doing things. And that theme, that kind of pivotal moment keeps coming back in different ways. Like another time it happened was I studied abroad in India when I was in university. And so I spent the summer in North India and we were backpacking the country. And that was a huge like pivotal moment where again, my whole perspective and mindset just completely unraveled and was open to a new extreme and degree. And it happened
Yeah.
again when I started traveling. So you can see it's like it's the same moment, but in a different degree. And so
Yeah.
that is something that also, it's not a resource specifically, but it's, I don't know what to call it, just an experience that has prepared me for where I am right now.
Yeah, no, and thank you so much for sharing that. That's something we all can benefit from. Almost, it's a paradigm shift, right? Just even operating in that way. It's not the norm. So you, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What advice would you give to, and you've dropped lots of sage advice here already. A lot of folks are working jobs they hate, they're burned out, and maybe hate is a strong word. Let's just say they're burned out and they're exploring what do I do next? For you, series of events led you to the path you're on right now. But for such a person on the precipice, thinking, what's my next move? What are some things you can leave for such a person? And I know that's very broad on purpose. Whatever you share, I'm sure will be helpful.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's just important to understand, especially if we're talking about someone who's working for someone else.
Yeah,
I, I don't want to be that guy, but just to be honest, you can't be so attached to the company and the work that you're doing. I think that's one thing I realized. Yes, I'm always invested in the projects I'm working on, but at the end of the day, if something were to happen to you, that company would move on very quickly to try to replace you so that the wheels can keep turning on whatever operation they have going. And likewise, you have to understand that this is not the 1960s where it really was like a family and they're taking care of you. It very much is fluid, and you have to keep that perspective and knowing that you only have one life to live, and all the things that you want to do and you hope to do in life, and tomorrow's not promised. And so, if there's something that you really want to do, I would say if you're thinking about making a shift and a change in your life, maybe a career change or something as crazy like I did, going to backpack West Africa, whatever it is, it may not be as crazy to do that thing now as you think it is. It might be the exact right time that you should do that thing. So don't rule anything out. Keep an open mind and understand that while you are invested in your work and whether it's working or not, there's also your life and the things that you want to enjoy and benefit from life. You should go do those things if you can.
absolutely. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Wei. I appreciate you getting on this episode of the Inflection Podcast with me. And I am super stoked to keep following your journey. It's amazing seeing your posts on LinkedIn as you share your experiences.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. So anyone wants to keep up with my journey, you can definitely follow me on LinkedIn. So if you just search my name on LinkedIn, or maybe you can add that to the show notes.
It-
Also, I have a weekly newsletter that I share on a weekly basis, my journey in remote work, my travels, and also the investments that I'm making here in West Africa, including the online business. So you can subscribe to that, and the link will also be there. That's it.
Fantastic. Let's go.
Let's do it.